The Fall of Andy Dufresne. Title: The Redemption Diaries, Life After Shawshank. Setting: Zihuatanejo, Mexico, Daesh post-Shawshank escape. Trauma, healing, legacy, and the power of storytelling. The shoreline of freedom. The wind carried salt through the air, and the Pacific crashed against the golden sands of Zihuatanejo. Andy Dufresne stood at the edge of the ocean barefoot, the tide lapping at his ankles. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, letting the vastness of the sea sink in. He had made it. He had crawled through filth, endured decades of silence, and now stood in the light of freedom. Yet, inside, not everything was quiet. In the dead of night, he would still wake up gasping, fists clenched, the sound of slamming prison doors echoing in his mind. Freedom, as Andy was learning, wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional, and some parts of him were still behind the bars of Shawshank. Red watched his friend from a distance. He had arrived weeks after Andy, guided by a letter hidden under an oak tree. The beach town had welcomed them. The boatyard kept their hands busy, and the simplicity of the life kept them grounded. Still, Red could sense the unrest in Andy, the lingering scars that time hadn't yet healed. Repairing more than boats. They bought a small boatyard with the money Andy had quietly funneled from Warden Norton's laundered accounts. Andy, always meticulous, worked every morning under the sun, sanding, painting, fixing broken engines. Red mostly swept the floors, organized tools, and smoked hand-rolled cigarettes. "Know what I love about engines?" Red once said. "They break, but they can always be fixed." Andy smiled. If only it were that easy for people. The silence between them was often comforting, but sometimes heavy. The unspoken truth hung between them. They were free, but they weren't healed. One day, as Red sat carving a piece of driftwood, a young boy approached. He was about 12, with messy hair, sun-darkened skin, and the look of someone who had seen too much too soon. "Hola," he said shyly. "You fix boats?" Andy nodded. "We try." The boy introduced himself as Mateo. He'd been living on the streets since his parents died in a car accident. Andy offered him food. Red offered him a job. Mateo started coming every day, learning quickly, asking questions, and bringing a strange light back into the boatyard. Andy saw something in Mateo, not just potential, but a reflection. A soul shaped by injustice, waiting for a second chance. Echoes of the Wall. Though the boatyard thrived, Andy's nights remained restless. He began keeping a journal. Not for therapy, he said, but for clarity. Each page was filled with sketches of cell blocks, reflections on solitary hours, and the philosophy of hope. One entry read, "Freedom is not just walking away from the gate. It's learning how to live without looking over your shoulder." Red stumbled across the journal one day but didn't say a word. He understood. Some things needed to be spoken privately, even if only to paper. That same week, a stranger arrived in Zihuatanejo. She wore jeans, boots, and carried a worn leather satchel. Her name was Eliza Carter, a freelance journalist from New York. She had heard whispers of an American who had escaped from Shawshank prison, a ghost named Andy Dufresne. She approached them at the boatyard, pretending to be a tourist at first. But Andy knew. Her eyes carried purpose, not curiosity. Over time, Eliza earned their trust. She wasn't chasing a scandal, and she was chasing truth. Her brother had been wrongfully convicted and died in prison. She saw in Andy not just a story, but a symbol. The burden of truth. Andy was torn. He had hidden for years, built a life on silence. Could he now risk everything to speak? Red warned him. They might still come for you. Andy looked out over the water. Then let them. I didn't escape Shawshank just to live in another kind of prison. That night, Andy handed Eliza a worn-out leather folder. His journal detailing everything: the corruption, the abuse, the escape, the pain. "I'm not a hero," he told her. "I'm just a man who got tired of being buried alive." Eliza promised to tell it truthfully, but neither of them knew what Matteo had done. The story goes public. Matteo had read Andy's journal when no one was watching. He didn't understand all the words, but he felt the pain, the courage, the hope. He typed a portion of it on a borrowed laptop at a cafe and submitted it to an international storytelling competition for survivors of injustice. A month later, a publisher from Mexico City called. Andy's story had won, not just hearts, but headlines. The article, The Redemption Diaries, spread across newspapers and websites around the world. Overnight, Andy became a global name. People didn't just admire his escape, they were moved by his message. TV stations called, lawyers called, human rights organizations reached out. And for the first time in years, the U.S. government reopened the Shawshank case. Part 6, Confronting the Past. A documentary crew flew to Zihuatanejo. Andy agreed to speak on camera, not to clear his name, but to tell the truth. Red sat beside him, their hands folded together like brothers. The interview went viral. Andy described the years of abuse by the sisters, the hypocrisy of Warden Norton, the soul-crushing solitude, and the final night. Thunder, rain, the crawl through filth, the taste of freedom. When asked what kept him going, Andy replied, "Hope is quiet, but it's stubborn. And when the world turns its back on you, it's the only friend that doesn't leave." The world was shaken. Investigations into multiple U.S. prisons began. Inmates wrote letters to Andy, thanking him. Judges re-examined wrongful convictions. Andy hadn't just escaped Shawshank, he had burned it to the ground. Part 7. Legacy of the Broken Walls. In the years that followed, Andy's journal was published as a memoir, The Redemption Diaries. All profits went to build libraries inside prisons. Matteo, once an orphan, became its first youth ambassador. He traveled to speak in schools and prisons across Latin America, using Andy's story to inspire others. Red? He finally wrote his own book. He called it After the Bars, a raw, honest account of how freedom is harder than anyone expects, but worth the pain. Andy never left Zihuatanejo. He found peace there. He opened a free reading school for children. He taught Matteo to sail. And every year, on the date of his escape, he walked to the edge of the water alone, stared at the sky, and whispered, "I'm still here." Part 8. The Final Entry. 10 years after the story went public, Andy Dufresne died peacefully in his sleep. Red found him in bed, a soft smile on his face, a copy of Les Miserables in his hands. At his funeral, Red spoke to a crowd of hundreds, prisoners, students, journalists, strangers from every corner of the world. He was a banker once, then a prisoner, then a ghost. But what I'll remember is the man who taught me that even broken wings can fly. Red buried him beneath a palm tree overlooking the ocean. No stone, just a wooden sign. Andy Dufresne, he crawled through hell and found the sea. Part 9. Full circle. Years later, Matteo stood where Andy once stood, the tide touching his feet. He had graduated law school, passed the bar, and now worked to free the innocent across Latin America. He carried with him a copy of Andy's journal, pages worn, edges torn, but the words still alive. "You are not your prison. You are the fire that survives it." Matteo wasn't alone. Around the world, the Redemption Diaries had become more than a book. It was a movement. Andy Dufresne's story proved that even in the darkest places, hope not only survives, it thrives. End of Episode 2. For more interesting and heart-touching videos, please visit our YouTube channel and subscribe. Thanks for watching.